Well, Nigerians reacted to the news of the Senate's approval of the Electoral Amendment Bill with excitement and waited for the all-important presidential assent to cap their joy. As feared and expected in some quarters, the joy was short-lived as President Muhammadu Buhari has declined assent to the bill, citing a slew of reasons, including the violation of human rights and not being restricted to the high cost of conducting direct primaries. After the presidential decline, all eyes now turn to the Nigerian legislative for the next course of action. Will the National Assembly vote to override the presidential assent or accept the decision of the president and look deeply and keenly into the legal reasons? Time, they say, will tell. Welcome to VSA. I'm Sulaiman. In November, Nigeria's Senate and House of Representatives passed the Electoral Amendment Bill. They also approved the electronic transmission of results. The Electoral Amendment Bill was forwarded to the President by the National Assembly on November 19. The news got Nigerians hopeful about what was ahead for the country, especially with the 2023 elections just a little above a year away. It promised to create enough opportunities for new political hopeful, but stood out in its issues, including the effectiveness of the electronic transmission of votes, powers held by the Independent National Electoral Commission, and of greatest interest to the political class in the country, the nature of primary elections. The Senate had approved direct primaries for political parties in the country, but it met strong objection from members of the political class, who posited that it was either too expensive to be held or denying of the powers held by the parties. It became an issue of the superior constitution, Nigerians, or the political parties. President Muhammadu Buhari said he declined assent to the bill because of the high cost of conducting direct primaries, security challenges of monitoring the election, marginalization of smaller political parties, and violation of citizens' rights. How the bill violates citizens' rights has been a topical issue, and the effects of the presidential decline on the future of elections in Nigeria and leadership recruitment process must be carefully analyzed. Joining me to look at this is Daniel Bwala. He's a lawyer and member of Lincoln's Inn, London. And thereafter, Segun Showunmi will be joining me. He's a political analyst and member of the People's Democratic Party. Well, good to see you, Daniel, and thanks for your time. Now, a lot of people have been speaking and commenting, lawyers and non-lawyers alike, and even politicians and non-politicians. Do you think, now, first of all, give us a sense of what this is about before we start talking about the president's action, if it's right or wrong?
Well, first of all, the history of election process or electioneering process in Nigeria has been a challenge and one that every citizen of Nigeria looks forward to a reform. If I take you back to 1999, when we commenced this republic, this part of the segment of the republic, we had election in 1991 that was hitherto characterized by malpractices. From 1999 till date, election petition cases arising from malpractice are now challenging entirety of criminal cases in Nigeria. So that suggests that our election or electioneering process or electoral process in Nigeria needs reform because it's marred with irregularity. What is the concept of democracy? Democracy is hinged on the doctrine of the government consists of the wishes of the people. That's why democracy is often described as the government of the people, for the people, by the people. You see the word people appearing 3 times to suggest that the government in entirety revolves around the people. And how will the people secure a government for themselves? It is through what we call election. An election is supposed to be a process where the wishes of the majority will find its course. So leaders who emerge as popular candidates, meaning that they emerge arising from the wishes of the majority, now serve as democratic leaders in a democratic society. In Nigeria, is the case the same? Because the allegation at the moment is that from 1999 till date, most of our leaders emerged not from the wishes of the majority, but from the manipulation of the minority. Now, all political parties have provided, in fact, the Constitution at the beginning gave them a little bit of blessing that democratic means is the process by which leaders emerge. And that the word democratic has been defined over time to involve direct primaries, indirect primaries, and consensus. Now, admittedly, these three concepts are democratic. However, there is a principle of law that says if an alternative of a situation creates more problem than the solution it seeks to provide, that alternative becomes a bad law. And that is what we have found the operations of indirect primaries and consensus. Because over time, consensus now has come to be the wishes of that big man. It could be a governor in a state where he is the incumbent, or it could be a senator or one big man in a state where the party is not an incumbent. He draws up a list, gather the people together, announce it for them, and say, this is consensus. Now, even though political party says that where there is a consensus, it must be reflected by a show of hands. But because it is mad and manipulated, that now will be accepted by the national body. Indirect primaries also is an undemocratic means in the real sense of the word. Why? Because we have just established at the commencement of this our conversation that democracy is the wishes of the majority. Delegate election is not the wishes of the majority. Some argue that the delegate themselves emerge from direct primaries and the delegate go ahead to vote leaders. But it has been proven over time, even the emergence of delegate in the quote-unquote direct primaries is flawed. But the more of the crime, or rather I should put it this way, the most crime in a delegate election is that it has now become a locus classicus in Nigeria where other contestants will be deprived of right to participate. So the president's statement that if he signs the bill, it will deal with the rights of the Nigerian people, to me is a fallacy. I'm still trying to grapple. What is the explanation? What is the definition? What's the connotation of that word? Because if democracy is a reflection of the majority, direct primaries is the only vehicle that will reflect the wishes of the majority. And that is why we felt disappointed. Even though I'm a member of APC, I felt highly disappointed that the president failed to assent to this bill, because this bill would have taken us a step further. In the course of our conversation, I will prove to you that every item as outlined by the president can be countered against the weight of evidence, even in the area of security and the rest.
You know, now we already know that you're not on that, on the side of the president. But again, you know, where does the judiciary come in here? Because, first, before we get back to the National Assembly, you know, in trying to interpret some of the key things you've just interpreted now, making it so clear, because I know that others like yourself who are divided, they're not on the same page with you. Can the judiciary help in making this, you know, clearer to Nigerians and even politicians like the president?
Usually, right. Usually the approach that would have brought in the judiciary to intervene would have been if, for example, the president is agreeable to the idea of electronic transmission, but is not agreeable to the provision for direct primaries. But since, because he craves also for a reform, he would have signed the bill. As soon as he signs it, it becomes a law. Then he will institute an action at the Supreme Court, challenging the provision of the Electoral Act that deals with direct primaries as unconstitutional, and that it will infringe on the right of the Nigerian people. When it does that, the Supreme Court will then look at it and interpret whether or not it is constitutional. The good thing is, if the Supreme Court interprets as unconstitutional, you see, that part of the law has now become null and void. But we have not thrown the baby with the bathwater. But if the Supreme Court interprets that it is constitutional, then that means there is no longer need for the National Assembly to go and talk about amendment. That will become a law. But over the years in Nigeria, we find that politicians are so lazy that when issues like that come, they don't want to approach the judiciary to see the intervention of the judiciary, because the whole essence of the judicial branch of government is to interpret the law, intendment of the lawmakers. In this case, we are not even talking about intendment. The lawmakers actually made a law that can be read and understood by the man on the street. There is no ambiguity with what they have provided for. They said that direct primaries now shall be mandatory. What is the ambiguity there? We already have in the various constitution of the party direct primaries, indirect, and consensus. So what the Electoral Act has done is to eliminate indirect and consensus. Now, although like I said at the beginning, that admittedly all the three are still part of democratic means, but some persons argued, and it's even in the statement of the president, when he said that the amendment raises legal and constitutional issue. What is it about constitutional issue that he raised? The Constitution, if you look at section 222, 223, 224, and 225, and down the line, you will see where the Constitution gave a very good position, a ballroom position for Inec as the body recognized by law to regulate the conduct of political parties and elections. So the idea that Inec cannot determine for a political party how they will conduct their election or how leaders will emerge is a fallacy. These sections that I've cited, time will not permit us to read them one after the other. But in a nutshell, the Constitution says it is Inec that every political party or association must register their constitution with Inec, and that the constitution they register with Inec must conform with the provisions of the Constitution and Chapter 2. And that constitution, if it is not consistent with the provision of Chapter 2, then INEC will not agree to register that. So if the Constitution gives INEC the power to regulate, to register, to deregister a political party, what makes you think that INEC cannot determine the modalities for conducting elections by political parties? And don't forget, the INEC is not saying that, let's say APC will do direct and PDP will do indirect. It is a provision of the law that applies to all political parties across board. And by the way, when we go for the final election that we otherwise call the general election, is it not a direct election? So direct primaries is saying that we are saying that the general election, which is the grown norm of all election process in Nigeria, should find its root at the grassroots. Why? Because by the time people go to the general election, bad leaders will already have been formed or would have secured their ticket. Undemocratic leaders would have already emerged. So the final conduct of election becomes an exercise in futility. And again, we talked about restructuring. The president demonstrated the willingness to bring restructuring by signing Section 121 sub 3 that granted autonomy to the judiciary and the legislature at the state. He signed executive order that granted autonomy to the local government. This would have been another blessing that the president will give that will grant what we call electoral restructuring, where the power to choose is taken away from governors and given directly to the people at the local. So the direct primaries is the general election in a prelude. Direct primary is a preamble of the general election. So to call direct primaries as unconstitutional, to me, is the gravest thing you can ever say. Because
Daniel, let me come in
delegate
here.
election is more important.
Now you're talking about the election. Sorry to butt in here, because the issues concerning the last election in Nigeria has only just, come forth. Talking about Anambra election, and you also must have noticed that some of the candidates who were in that election got more than enough number for the primaries, and on election day, it would seem as if those who voted for that same candidate or for these candidates during primaries didn't come for that election. For instance, the man who represented the APC got almost 300,000, almost 400,000, but on election day, there was no number close to that number. And you have also contested at one point in time under your party. Tell us, let us in on if there are the evil in indirect, primaries.
So let me say it this way in responding to your question. You see, the excuse that the proponent, those who argue that direct primaries will create more mischief, even is reflected in the letters of the president. and they give example of the primaries that was APC primaries conducted in Anambra, where Andy Uba was alleged to have secured more than 300,000 votes. But in the final election, less than that came. So obviously everybody knew that direct primaries result was fictitious. Now, when I was running in 2018 and 19, in the FCT here, we had direct primaries. The same thing happened. One of the contestant aspirants who hails from Bwala as his native town, on the day of the election, he got some people to file that he scored 265,000 votes. And yet there was no hold-up, there was nothing in Gwagwalada. In fact, there was no election, as it were, because that was where they were burning tires, and they said it happened. Now, you see, those who try to kill this vision simply because of one problem, isolated problem, are the same set of people that try to say there is no need for the younger people to take over the reins of power because they will point at one young man who has been elected and has not been able to prove himself. So that is an isolated argument. But let me tell you this, when you talk about the ills, the same ills that you see in direct primaries, what you see in general election. If we are making effort to correct general election, we can correct direct primaries because they are the same. It's just for the name. One is called direct primaries at the political party level, one is at the general election. Now, what are the evils of indirect primaries? The evils of indirect primaries is that the people, the members of the political party, will not get the opportunity to reflect their wishes in the votes. Because the delegates who were appointed by the people oftentimes are under the control of either the governor or the senator, whoever is the big man that runs the structure in the state. And we have seen over time here in Nigeria where this delegate will be kept somewhere. In some cases, they are even sewn uniform. So apart from the preferred candidate of the governor, who get the opportunity to engage with them, all the other aspirants or contestants in the election will never get to see the delegate to engage with them and share what their vision is for the party until the day of election when they show up. And then you see these guys will be brought out of probably a bus and they will go straight to vote that person. That is a caricature. And that is the ills of delegate election. Now, contrast that with direct primaries where at least the people are expressing their wishes. It's just that others are inflating the numbers. Which one is more evil and which one at least reflect the wishes of the people? And besides, that's why Inec is mandated to be in all of the primaries conducted by political parties to observe. Why do you think that they are asked to observe? The record, the testimony that the Inec official who observed will give in court is what would vindicate the aggrieved party who is unjustly treated at the primaries. So if Inec is observing a primary, say in Wuse, where somebody manipulated numbers and he says somebody won 200,000, but meanwhile less than 3,000 people were present. Remember, Inec has observed and Inec will file a testimony. At the end of the day, that will vindicate the aggrieved person. So when you bring in the ills and the positives, the argument would always be that direct primaries is the shortest way by which we can move this election further. Because as it stands, we have actually not moved an inch as far as electoral process is concerned.
And the president waited for, for the last day, for him to get that letter out. Keep in mind, it's not the first time we've seen President Buhari refusing to assent to the Electoral Amendment Bill. He did that in 2018. That was prior to the 2019 election. For some other people, even like yourself, are you worried about, the make of, experts, legal minds around the president to better make him understand this? Do you think it is about his legal advisors, political advisors, National Assembly advisors, or this is just the president's thinking?
So I've had a training in the United States of Peace, and over time my training in reading speeches and then deciphering from the speech patterns. So for example, if you are used to speaking as Sulaiman and somebody's speech is drafted and there is a suspicion that you probably have drafted the speech for him, if I run through the pattern of your speech, I can decipher whether or not in the person's speeches there are one or two things that can be linked to you. If you read the speech of the president, and I beat my chest to tell you, you would know that it is the Attorney General that drew the speech for the president. Now, let me give you just one example, and I will not give more till another time. When you listen to Attorney General 2, 3, 4, 5 times, there are certain words that are consistent in his speeches, in his analysis, and in his communication. That word is called arising from. Arising from. When you read the speech, you will see from the speech of the president, the word arising from appeared at least 4 to 5 times. And immediately after the word arising from are the same pattern of thoughts that the Attorney General has expressed in the public space regarding this same issue. Now, without having to even look at those nitty-gritties, it is common knowledge that the Attorney General is the chief advisor of the president on matters of law and that it affects the government of the federation. So we don't even have to go to the bush start looking for who advised the president. It's the Attorney General. However, the problem I have, quite frankly, and I said that when the president began his second term, that there are certain positions of government, and I'm not saying that to denigrate the Attorney General, certain positions of government, they are devoted to professionals who do not have political inclination, so that when they give their advice, it will be pure professional and devoid of any political coloration. When somebody occupies the post of an Attorney General who himself is a politician with political ambition, sometimes it will be very, very difficult for him to separate himself, his interest, from the national interest. And this is what, in my view, and as a private citizen, I read from these speeches. So it is the advice, and I don't blame the president because he's not a lawyer. And in his usual characteristic, if you have studied the president over time, he loves to delegate responsibilities to people and depend on their opinion on the matter. When National Assembly submitted this their passed bill to him, at first he gave to Inec to hear their view on that. After he gave to Inec, he gave to the Attorney General. Although in his letter you will say he said he gave ministries, department, and agencies, but I know they are smokescreen. After Inec, I think the next person is the Attorney General, who will then explain. Maybe security agencies too may have been given to advise whether there will be security implication. But in a nutshell, all of the security and law enforcement of the country, they are under the supervision of the Office of the Attorney General.
So in this case, Daniel, sorry, I'm just trying to see how much we can actually take before you leave. What should the people's representatives, now talking about the National Assembly, what can they do at this point in time if, for instance, they think otherwise?
Well, generally, the option, not just because of them, but generally with every parliament, when a bill is rejected like that, constitutionally, they have two options. Option number one will be to override his veto. And two-thirds majority is the vote that is required to override, and it becomes a law. Once they pass that, it becomes a law irrespective of the withholding of the assent of the president. But that option remains to be seen whether they will do that, because then you will now throw it into political issues. You see caucus meeting, interventions, and usually it will take a National Assembly that will consider this particular bill as an existential bill, do or die, because they've already red flagged by this amendment. They have to understand that. So if they pipe down, the governors will not return them because they've already red flagged. So if they can go all the hog, they can override this veto and it becomes a law. That's the first option. The second option is that they can take the bill, since what he complained about is direct primaries, they can take back the bill, take out direct primaries, rework all the bills, and then run them through legislative process and send it back to him as a fresh bill, not as a bill rejected, but as a fresh bill. But because that which he feared is taken out, he will then assent to it. There are school of thought that believe that after this one, the next target will be electronic transmission of results, that there is no guarantee that if they repass it again, that the president will assent. So the best bet will be to override, but whether they will do that remains to be seen.
You fit the as a Nigerian living in diaspora, or, once upon a time. Does it also bother you that the electoral bill itself hasn't actually put in place some of those key, issues as diaspora voting, independent candidacy, as well as reforms to the punishment of electoral offenses? Nigerians thought that these are germane issues, known for the part played by Nigerians living in the diaspora.
Well, this is, again, area of my core competence, because I'm a consultant with the National Assembly on Constitutional Review, and we have a pool of legal minds, professors of law, senior advocates of Nigeria, lecturers, and luminaries, in law who are advising. I can tell you that diaspora voting was seriously considered. However, some of the issues that were raised, it is not yet Uhuru, but some of the questions that were raised at the time, I remember in one of our sessions was whether if diaspora voting is enshrined in the Constitution, it is achievable, it is realistic. Because some persons in our meeting gave example of plenty foreigners from, I think, Ghana and one other country that run with Nigerian passports, and you cannot detect them. So that more non-Nigerians will be involved in the voting process, and whether INEC has the infrastructure to conduct diaspora voting. If it's going to be, is it going to be by electronic voting? Is it going to be by physical voting? And if yes, where is it at the embassy? Where? All of that was considered. Independent candidacy was discussed at the Electoral Act amendment level. And I remember the National Assembly shut it down on the ground that if you introduce that, you may have more than 1,000 persons running for, let's say, presidential. And since INEC must produce the names of all of them, it is not realistic. The infrastructure to do that might not be in place. That was the basis on which they shut it down. It is something that can be discussed again. In terms of electronic, dealing with offenders, election offenders, that one has been there in the law. The problem is that INEC cannot prosecute it. It takes law enforcement. And oftentimes the offenses are committed with the law enforcement as accessories. When these politicians bribe them, they then allow the persons at the polling booth to then perpetuate this evil. But the law is there to punish them, and it is well defined. Punishment is described, but the problem is the enforcement of that.
Let's close on this. Do you think that we're likely to see the National Assembly, veto the president? This is the president's last term in office.
Right. So I have engaged with some of the principal officers of the National Assembly even before this bill was rejected, because I knew a week ago that the bill was going to be rejected. It's a matter of time. Now, their disposition is that they can't say a word until when they return. And you remember in the plenary, the speaker also said that that issue will be addressed when they return. So hopefully between now and when they will return, they will be able to know and assess themselves whether they are prepared for this showdown, or they are going to give a diplomatic approach to it. The question you asked, whether they can, but whether they will is what I don't know.
Well, it's a good one, and I'm hoping that we'll have time to do this again, Daniel, to stay on this, because this is a story that many Nigerians woke up to, and as you said, you saw this coming a week ago, and perhaps you should also be here to give us more insight just before the new year. Many thanks, Daniel Bwala.
Well, thank you. Merry Christmas.
I wish it the same. Coming up, Segun Showunmi after the break.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, can you see me?
Yes, I can, sir. Please put your, yeah, okay, yes. Is there, I don't know, like, we can't really see your face, like it's dark. Can we get more light?
I know now. Let me try and look for somewhere else.
Okay, sir.
How about now?
Okay, yes, this place is better, sir.
It's better.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, we don't waste too much time because I really am not. Let me even get a chair for myself.
Oh, that's what I wanted to say. That I think it would be convenient you getting a chair, sir.
I know now. We go Mama down.
Ẹ má bínú sá mi ìdàyín láwọn ẹ má bínú sá.
Happy with it now.
Okay, yes, sir. It's fine now. All right, sir.
Ask your question. Let me go, please.
President Buhari has for a long time been regarded in many quarters as a statesman, but the decline of presidential assent threatens this status. Notable politicians, current and former governors and legislators reacted to the bill, and Nigerians believe these may have influenced the president's decision. It's an opportunity for the transformation of Nigeria's electoral process, but that opportunity may be falling off. The coming days will go a long way to determine what path Nigeria is headed as it faces its electoral future with the 2023 election on course. And now joining me is Segun Showunmi, is a political analyst and a member of the People's Democratic Party. Good to see you, Segun Showunmi. Thanks for your time. You know, it's the fifth time, not the first time, where...
Sulaiman.
Thank you very much. It's the fifth time, because everyone seems to be counting here, Segun, that the president will decline, assent. Do you think the president has done the right thing by declining assent to the Electoral Amendment Bill?
Well, it's painful and it's most unfortunate that it appears as if President Muhammadu Buhari will go down in Nigeria's history as one president who truly dislikes to do the will of the people. These amendments that he has held his veto gets more offensive when you think about the history of electoral reforms in this country. Significant improvement has been made over the past, with different administrations adding one thing or the other to it as a result of the House of Assembly and the legislature putting in this, creating and closing the gaps that you see in some of the lapses. In the build-up to 2019, the president said it was too late and all of that, dilly-dallied until the couldn't sign. We're working towards 2023 again, and typical of him, he has also dilly-dallied and held on his assent, looking for the flimsiest of excuse why he will not do so. One is able to hold the view that it's a flimsy excuse, because if you want to withhold your assent, why wait until the last day? And if you have a minor issue with it, why is it possible for a party, the APC, that has majority in the governors, majority in the House of Reps, majority in the House of Assembly, majority in the Senate and the presidency, to find it extremely difficult for them to pass a bill or work jointly to improve the electoral process? At the end of the day, what will go down is that whatever integrity the president had been, borrowed in or gapped in over the years, we have seen clearly that he's, after all, just mortal, and that he will bounce and go to the whims and caprices of a small clique within his own party, who will be going against the general will of the people. In terms of the quality of what has been put forward, we must commend the legislature for the effort in putting that bill together. Yes, I agree to some extent that you cannot foreclose and force political parties to do your primaries one way or the other. Casting it absolutely is a bit wrong, but is that the only thing in that bill? What about the desire for them to have electronic transmission of results? What about all the other interesting things that that bill contains? But, you know, it's President Muhammadu Buhari and his APC. I've been more bothered about the fact that is democracy supposed to be a system of government where one individual, the president now in this case, is wiser, smarter, more intelligent, more loving of the country than every other person in the country? Because for a very, very long time, this particular bill seemed to enjoy support across board. Yes, there are dichotomies as to why do you want to force your will on political parties? Why do you want them to go one way or the other? And why do you want to legislate it in a finality tone? But can that not be adjusted? Is that the reason why every other thing that that bill contained would now not be allowed to go through? Will Muhammadu Buhari forget the precedents that have been set by his colleague or the former president of Blessed Memory, Umaru Musa Yar'Adua, who was able to say, the election that brought me in was not as fair as I would have loved, and therefore I'm going to set up machinery to improve it. And he tried. Even the Jonathan regime did everything humanly possible to improve it. The only person that has constantly refused to allow us to improve this electoral act one way or the other is the Buhari administration. And shame on the APC and their people, because it is clear that even they themselves and their party do not speak with one voice, and they do not have their own caucuses with which they are going to look at issues and come to a conclusion.
Let me come in here, because a while ago you commended the National Assembly, and if you look at the makeup of the National Assembly, the APC is in majority. Is it safe to say, yes, is it safe to say this is not even the party thing, but it's about the presidency and not the party? Because if we talk about the party...
The question I'm begging for answer, Sulaiman, is that do they not have party caucuses? Anyway, they don't. They don't even have the full organs of party in place. They are running with caretaker. So they do not have a place where they take care of some of these issues before it comes to becoming a macabre dance of disgrace. The party, the House of Assembly, the Senate, and all of them, they passed this bill. It's a majority APC. How disgraceful is it for it to now come down to a fact where one individual, no matter how highly placed, the president, is going to tell the whole of Nigeria that, oh, there's no need for us to improve the electoral act. We're going to keep it the way it is because a few of my friends are trying to be clever by half. You know, that's why I said shame on them, because you would have expected that whatever issues they will have with that bill, those issues should have been discussed in their own caucuses, and they should have brought a bill that both the executive and the legislature within the APC majority that they have will be able to live with. But alas, of course, the contraption of straight bedfellows can only behave this way.
And you raise a very important point, which I also asked Daniel Bwala. The president waited for the 11th hour, for the D-Day, for him to bring up that communication to the National Assembly. Do you think this is a setback for Nigeria's electoral progress? Because listening to you talking about one man in the face of millions of Nigerians, what can the representatives of the people do in this case?
One of the challenges of this our democracy, the Nigerian version of it, is that over the years, the legislators have not really understood what their role is and why they are supposed to be the ones that have the power to legislate, make laws for the good running and the peace and all of that of the society. Therefore, if they had grown balls over the years, you would have seen that no president would hold a veto against a very popular legislative agenda that both bicameral legislators are on board of. Now, for him to do that is the level of disdain that we have been screaming about. It appears as if we no longer have a democracy in Nigeria. What we have is a monarchy. And the monarchy that we have in Nigeria is a monarchy of President Muhammadu Buhari doing things according to how only him accepts and following the rules that only him and a few of his friends can tell you that they are doing. But long and short, it is not good for him, even more than anything else. If the Nigerian people are resolute, if the Nigerian people make up their mind, they are still able to defeat him and defeat his party. And because right now they have seen that they do not mean well.
So some are already saying that the party members in the National Assembly... Sorry, I lost you for a bit. I thought you were done.
for the democracy that we have been nurturing for many years. But hello, who do you blame? When you bring a repentant Democrat like Buhari to come and take advantage of a democratic institution like this, these are the kinds of things you will expect. So blame them all you like. We are stuck with it because in a democracy, his term is guaranteed for him, unless, of course, if the National Assembly will just impeach him and let us put an end to this agony and nightmare that has dragged on for too long.
Well, the elections are getting closer to the people. 2023 is almost here. Do you think that this decision by President Buhari could be linked to some people's personal political ambition towards 2023?
I think that first and foremost, there's a lot of rumor all over the place. But I prefer that we just leave out the rumor for the people that like to peddle rumor. What is important is this. Muhammadu Buhari, His Excellency, the President of our country, is going to go down as the only president that had an obstinate refusal to improve the electoral process. The whole business of improving the law, reforming it and all that is because the gaps that are seen are usually being brought forward. You have written to Inec. Inec has told you they have the ability to do it. You have done caucus meetings. You have called stakeholders. Civil society has weighed in. Everybody has talked about it. But perhaps one or two or three of your friends who have a sinister agenda for your party are insisting that they don't want some popular people to be able to win an election because they want to control everything. Hello, if you were that confident of your popularity, what is wrong with giving the people even a little bit more franchise in determining their candidate? At the end of the day, as far as I'm concerned, it's all President Muhammadu Buhari and nobody else. And he's going to go down in the history of Nigeria as one president who definitely, even though he enjoyed the benefits of democracy, is now a civilian president. He's never a Democrat and will never be.
Well, Segun, it doesn't look like a hopeless situation, is it? Because it takes us back to, I remember then you were also one great Nigerian who also was, talking about those key things that brought about doctrine of necessity. So if this is so important for the people, for Nigerians, how can the people ensure that their representatives, the governors, everyone ensures that this is not swept under the carpet?
Imagine if this was happening under the 8th Assembly of Bukola Saraki. A lot of Nigerians would have held a bet that for whatever is worth, he will give it a fight and try to make sure that the will of the people prevail. But is that what you can say about the President of Affairs of the 9th Assembly? Alas, they can say what they like. They've given the president a blanket check to do whatever he likes, however he likes, whenever he likes, the way he likes, and that they will always stand by him. Oh yeah, I do not support a rancorous assembly, but I also do not want an assembly that will not stand with the goodwill of the people. What do the Nigerians want in this particular instance? If you do a survey of Nigerians, all Nigerians believe that an electoral improvement to engender more confidence, to open up the space a little bit more, to liberalize the selection processes is due. All Nigerians believe that the transmission of results must have less human interference, and that the reality of the matter is that if you can use machine learning to do so many things in the world, we cannot have a Muhammadu Buhari who is so analog and he will insist that it's only the old way of running around with the old archaic ideas of 30, 40 years ago. That's where his own worldview ended. And if his worldview is no longer relevant to the present era, we just have to stick with it and pray that the Nigerians will get the courage to be able to do what is necessary when they are called upon now to come and vote. Don't forget, the same electoral act that Jonathan had in place was what PDP lost an election with. Therefore, if Nigerians are resolute, if they will determine to punish the APC for this absolute gross indiscretion, then of course, Nigerians can say, we have had enough of this nonsense. You did not behave well in opposition. You did not behave well in government, and you are not deep in democracy. Therefore, out you go.
This shouldn't be a problem if the country has a very strict separation of powers.
Well, there's no reason why the powers cannot be separated. It's down to the legislature. It's down to them. The powers are there. The powers are residing with them. They have the power of appropriation. They have the power to override. They have the power of oversight. They have the power to call anybody and query him. They even have the power to serve the president with impeachment notice. But if you are in a bondage until you make up your mind that, okay, enough, nobody can free you. There's a point that says, oh, I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have killed 1,000 more if only they could cognize in their mind that they are slaves.
So in all of this, we're talking about Nigerians, yourself, political parties, the civil society has also condemned the decline of the ascent. Is there a possibility that the president will reverse his decision?
Sulaiman, just listen to how that sounds. A nation of more than 200 million people, a legislator that represents everybody from all of the constituency in a bicameral model. The both houses have taken in inputs from Nigeria. They prepared about 185 point bill, and we are going to now be cringing, begging, rolling on the floor because Your Highness, Emir Buhari, is now the president of Nigeria, and his own thought process is superior to everybody. Is that not even offensive on its own? It is not supposed to be so. Democracy was not designed so that the view of one individual, however highly placed, would trump everybody's view. It's sad.
You made mention of the 8th Assembly. Let's talk about the 9th Assembly and its leadership. Is there a kind of leadership that should be able to, serve Nigeria with a veto in the coming days?
I think what I'll say to the 9th Assembly and Lawan, the Senate President Lawan, every generation must, out of relative obscurity, determine for itself what his agenda is, and they must be seen to fight it, or they must die in oblivion. This is actually the test case of the independence of the Lawan-led Senate and the Gbajabiamila-led Federal House of Reps. However they play is what we'll write permanently on the epitaph. Probably will write on their head, here lies a man that misused power and could not win independence because he did not understand the independence of the legislature.
Segun,
so it's up to them.
Some of the key things the president mentioned in his communication, I just want you to react to that. He mentioned violation of citizens' rights as one of the big reasons he declined the bill, and some are wondering how this is.
It's painful when a man who is the chief security officer, who will still go ahead to organize a general election in spite of the so-called security issues that they are throwing up, who will generate numbers from war zones in millions on election day. It's painful that purely internal affairs of parties to present and to pick their candidate, which was meant to expand it so that more members of the party who are registered can participate in the selection process. It's painful that he can have anything other than append his signature. But like I told you, what has Buhari ever done that has surprised anybody? President Buhari never pleasantly surprised us. The only thing he does is he aggravates our anger. He makes it clear to us that we are not insane by saying that, hey, you're not doing well. And you can go through the last 6+ years, and you will see that at every point in time, when Nigerians needed their president to step forward and be with the Nigerians, he was always against them.
The elections are almost here. How can Nigeria avoid, a booby trap? Because you've just said something about the former presidents, late Yaradua, and of course, Goodluck Jonathan. Each one of them played a part in our electoral act, in our electoral system to this moment, and none has actually come from this administration. What can Nigerians do going forward as they seek to elect a new government, as this is the very last run of the president?
The Nigerians must understand that with democracy comes civil responsibility. There is no point in saying you are in a democracy if you will not carry out your civil responsibility of going to register, or painstakingly being interested in the candidates, of interrogating them and checking them out, of voting and standing by your vote. There's no other miracle. Perhaps if we were not in a democracy, most of the things that the present president has been doing, maybe it would have ended very quickly because it's not democracy. But when it's democracy, it's stamped. Yeah, the first 4 years, they collaborated to dash him another 4 years at our expense. Therefore, the Nigerians must be more vigilant. They must be more resolute. They must be more determined. They must make sure that they do not allow voter apathy or lackadaisical attitude to prevent them from taking back their country. And I believe that they will take back their country because this country has fought civil military rule, and we outlasted them. It's a marathon. It's not a dash. And by the special grace of God Almighty and the patronages of Nigeria, we will outlast this administration that has been extremely bad for our country.
Does this also worry you, looking at the, the appointees of the president? The president has a special assistant on National Assembly matters, has the Attorney General, and has in his cabinet some bright legal minds. And here we are talking about some key things that are democratically, needed for a nation to move forward. So, is it a case of the appointees not necessarily giving the president the right direction?
No, I think in this particular case, you have to put it only on the table of the president, because these issues were discussed non-stop in the country. Should a president not be listening to what Nigerians are saying? It was the issue of discussion of almost every television, every radio, every discussion program, every newspaper, editorials written by many people. A lot of stakeholders are waiting. What more does he need? He has written to Inec. They've given him a professional advice as to their ability to be able to make it happen. What more does he need? You can't even understand what will be his tangible reason, save for the lame excuse of insecurity. And then you laugh. Sulaiman say there's insecurity to organize primaries, but there's no insecurity to organize general election. You know the problem with hypocrisy? Hypocrisy sticks to the roof.
Well, Segun Showunmi, before I let you go, let's quickly talk about INEC. Do you think this, if it's not vetoed by the National Assembly, how will this affect the preparation of INEC towards 2023?
I think with proper respect to that organization, they seem to have been able to survive and manage no matter what the political class throws at them. And they have been able to show that at least they mean well. Sometimes you look at their operating manuals, the designs, the work they put in, I say, okay, they mean well. It's always the political class that becomes an obstacle. And I must add very quickly, it is not necessarily the right thing to do to insist that you will not allow an improvement or a change for the better. And when you imagine that the party that goes up and down the street screaming change to the Nigerian people is the one standing on the same spot and preventing the Nigerian people from having bigger stakes in how their candidates are selected, you just have to shake your head and say, oh, how the mighty falling. A leopard can never change the spots.
Well, it's a fine place for us to leave it. Segun Showunmi, many thanks for your time. And to our viewers, you heard both sides. And of course, the president has declined assent to the Electoral Amendment Bill, and Nigerians are not happy. Politicians are not happy. The future of elections in 2023 also have a great leaning on the assent. In the coming days, more will be revealed about the bill, the stand of the National Assembly, and the president. I'm Sulaiman. See you again.